Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, wherever you are. Welcome to the Blender Basics stream with myself, Monty. And today we have an extra special guest. We have the lead 3D designer for the Seekers. We have Moritz. Hello, Moritz. How are you going?
What's up? Yeah, I'm doing good.
Good.
Halfway through the day.
Awesome. Yes. And it's Friday for us today. So we are not like we're counting, but we're eagerly awaiting the end of the week. But we thought to celebrate the end of the week, we will pop on a wonderful live stream today to show you how to use Blender. So as you have probably seen recently, the Seekers have released our 3D files that are now available in the underground. So you can head on over to the underground and you can download your 3D files, and then what is next? Well, today we have Moritz here to explain to you how to best use, move, animate your 3D files. So it's going to be a good one. And you're really going to be wanting to listen out to this tutorial today, because at the end of this tutorial, not only will we be awarding you all a poet for attending and absorbing all this wonderful knowledge, there will also be I've got something that's quite exciting happening at the end. And for those of you asking, yes, this is going to be recorded. So if you have people or friends that can't make this, or if we're going too fast and you want to go back and figure out some more information, then it will be recorded, so no problem. If you may have seen on the Discord, there was a couple of things that you kind of needed to prep before this if you're going to do it live back to back with Moritz and I. But if you're not, all groovy, just sit back, relax, and listen. But yeah, awesome. So I see a bunch of folks in the chat. Hey, good morning, good afternoon. How are we doing today? We're doing good? Good. Awesome. Some will be on the stream soon. I see Poap or Noap. Very good. I see a lot of familiar faces and names. Wonderful to be with you this Friday morning or Thursday evening, wherever you are. Very, very good. Before we get started, has anybody been experimenting with their 3D files so far? Have we got any professionals in the chat? Let's have a little look. I did see a wonderful example in the Discord earlier, which was it was kind of like they had a little bit of a Sims glitch, which was great. So hopefully today we can remedy all of that, and Moritz can give you the 101 how to not create like a glitched Sim Seeker with Blender. So that is good. Oh, looks like we've got a whole bunch of newbies here, Moritz, that haven't tried before. So I'm very excited for that. Very good. Awesome. Moritz, do you want to give us a little bit of a background on you and your journey with 3D animation before we get into it?
3D animation, huh? Yeah, I've been in New Zealand now for 16 years, and I kind of slipped into 3D by coincidence, I suppose. So I grew up in Germany, where we do a lot of sort of fine arts in school, but that's not really a subject that anybody would encourage you to go into, at least at the time when I was studying. People were like very skeptical that you could make money off this. And then when I came to New Zealand after high school, that's the only thing I ever knew that I was good at was art. So I just went to media design school, and they kind of informed me of like what you can actually do with art, because there's a lot. There's design, there's concept art, there's web design. Like there's so many categories. And I did like an orientation course with them, which I forgot what the course was called. Creative though. Some creative course, and 3D was one of the things that I learned there, which was more specifically Blender in the first year, I suppose because it was free, and I just got hooked on it. I love Blender. I love the community around Blender because there's so much resources on YouTube and amazing artwork out there that you can get inspired from. And then when I see other people create cool stuff, I get excited, and then I want to jump back into Blender and try it myself. And the most exciting part for me using Blender for that long is sort of seeing the journey that Blender has gone through, back from the old 2.49 days to where it is now. it's a completely different software, and seeing it being adopted more in the mainstream sort of pipelines, especially for smaller companies that start off now. It's a really cool opportunity to get going, and it's such a powerful tool. So I'm really excited that I get to pass on some of the knowledge that I had on this, and hopefully create one or two new Blender enthusiasts.
Yes, awesome. Yeah, hopefully you can share that passion amongst the crowd, and we can see, yeah, get some more Blender humans. We also had a comment here from WBG Whitebeat Gang. Remember that there is a Seeker giveaway for people attending today, open to everyone that shares their 3D art within the next 24 hours and claims a POAP. So if you are encouraged and inspired after this, share your 3D art, tag Whitebeat Gang and the Seekers on Twitter, and you'll be in the draw to win a Seeker. So very, very exciting. Awesome, cool. So well, without any further ado, Moritz, should we jump into it?
Yeah, I'll share my screen and then we'll take it from there. Be forewarned, like we didn't plan any of this because I feel like there's such varying levels of expertise. I suppose some people will have already learned some won't. So we're just going to jump into Blender and discuss some of the basics and how to like move around. And then depending on how today goes, I suppose we're going to do a follow-up, or the alternative to that as well as, of course, like tag me on Discord. And if you have questions, I'm super happy to answer them.
Totally, yeah. So I'll pop Moritz's tag in the Discord. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to tag him. And while we go through, if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to post them in the chat. I will be watching the chat the whole time, and anytime I see a question arise, I will jump in and we'll go through it like that. So yeah, brilliant. All right, well, here we go, and take it away, Moritz.
Okay, I mean, when you first launch Blender, the very first time you started off, there's going to be a few options that you're presented with in terms of, do you want to select with a left click? Do you want to select with a right click? Do you want the spacebar to search? So on that end, some of your settings might vary from what I have on my end. So I'm using right click to select. My spacebar is to search. And so pay attention to what your initial setup says, and if there's any discrepancies between what I say and what you see on stream, then either ask me or check your preferences. So you can at any time, if you go up the top and check your preferences under input, for example, you can check what's differs between yours and mine, and you can change your key map. So if you search in your key maps for, like, say, search bar, you can alter that here. Otherwise, I also have enabled an add-on called Screencast Keys. So if the stream is moving too fast or you don't know what's going on, you can obviously, this is going to be recorded, and you'll see in the bottom right corner all the key presses that I'm doing. And then that way, if you ever get lost, watch it again maybe, or like I said before, there's so much resources on even Googling it. There's a lot of what you call cheat sheets where people have mapped out the most common hotkeys and all that. But I thought for starters, we kind of just go over the UI. So your UI might already look a little bit different depending on what layout you have. And it's a nice thing about Blender that what you see here is, for example, the various viewports. In the top left corner, you see what these viewports mean. So this little drop down that you see in the top left corner describes that this currently is the 3D viewport. The 3D viewport is basically just to look around whatever you're currently working on. If we add a new mesh, for example, it shows up, you rotate around it, you can inspect it, you can make edits to it. That's the viewport. And I'll describe, if they become relevant, the other ones. So you have the outliner up here, and the outliner is describing all the objects in your scene. So at the moment, for example, I've got 4 lights in my scene. If I click the little filter icon and I enable the selection, if I click on them, you see what's selected. And then down here, you have the properties. And if you don't have these windows, by the way, what it is if you hover over any corner of any window in Blender, say the top right corner, you notice your mouse turns into like a little cursor. And if you click down and drag over, you can make new windows, or you can click in the top right corner and collapse them onto existing ones. So you can customize your viewport however you want. So my one is currently set to the 3D viewport. This one is set to be the outliner. And down here we have properties, and this one is the timeline for animation purposes. So in my outliner, I can see all the objects. You also have what you call collections. So it's not a new feature anymore, I suppose, but you can organize your scene by moving stuff into collections, which makes it very easy. Say if you have the seeker on scene, you have the environment, you have, I don't know, whatever you're going to have in your scene. It makes it easy to isolate parts of your scene into collections, and in that way, speed up your viewport, speed up your renders, stay organized. And I can encourage that, like, stay organized early on, because the more stuff you add to the scene, the harder it becomes later on to make changes. You know, if you have 4 Suzannes and you don't know which Suzannes you actually want to render at the moment, so make collections, stay on top of it, and that's all I can say. Down here is the properties, and I'm just going through the most relevant windows for now. Properties are very important. So you have your general settings, and they're somewhat contextual. So if I'm currently on Suzanne, you see the options here might change. Like you want to have mirror functionality, that's what you find down here. But when you're in object mode, for example, it's again different. You have your render settings. The Seekers project was entirely built around cycles, and that's because the nature and the scope of the project was too complex to use Eevee or real-time rendering. Like the shaders were way too complex to run in real time. And I'm not going to go through all the settings here. I would encourage everybody to like watch maybe some Blender Guru tutorials on YouTube to find good render settings that are relevant for you. One thing that I would say is relevant for us today is the fact that if you downloaded your Blender file and you might say, hey, my let's say this, the monkey is now looking smooth, right? And if your Blender scene, your Seeker looks a little bit jaggy, that's usually because we have Simplify enabled. And Simplify basically says, what is the maximum subdivisions a mesh can have? And I set it to 0 so that while I'm working, everything runs smooth. But when I'm rendering, you can see the render limit is still set to 6. So your viewport, it might look jagged. If you render it out, it's not going to be jagged. But if you want it to be smooth in your viewport, just increase the maximum subdivisions here back to a higher number, and then it should look correctly in the viewport as well. It just means that when you play back your animations, it might be a little bit choppy. These are render settings, I think not relevant for today's output. And render layers, these are object properties, like where the object is located in space, how it's rotated, what the scale is. These are modifiers. I think that's one of the nicest things about Blender, is the modifiers tab, which a lot of, I don't actually know which, I think Max does a little bit of modifiers. I haven't used it. But it's stuff like, if you have half a mesh, you want to add a mirror modifier as an example. And then that way your, you know, whatever you do on the left side happens on the right side. And there's a bunch of modifiers that you can experiment with this. I get really excited when people find creative ways to use modifiers. But let's not delve too much into that for now either. What else? Particle systems, not relevant for most people for what we're doing right now. Physics, neither. And then object constraints is another one where, say you have a camera and you wanted to look at your monkey, you can do, for example, a track 2 constraint. And then in the constraint, you can see like this is now tracking Suzanne, and constraints come in different flavors. There's different types of constraints. Again, I would encourage anybody to have a look on YouTube or wherever else. Data properties, which refers to normals, and I'm probably just going to say a bunch of jargon that doesn't make sense to a lot of people. UV maps. UV maps is basically what does your 3D mesh look like if you were to cut it open on one end and flatten it on a flat piece of paper to add texture to it. And you have data like vertex colors and all that. And again, more detail than what you need right now. And then you have material properties at the bottom. And materials is, you can add a material, you can make edits to the material. So if we look at it and rendered, it's now red. Or you can add more than one material. So we could select the eye and make another material and assign that to the eye. And then you can have bespoke materials on different parts of your mesh. And that is the properties panel in a nutshell. So this was previously set to timeline, and that is where you can scrub through your animation. And so if we had, say, oh, one more thing. You have the keying set at the moment. The keying set refers to what properties of your object you want to add keyframes to. So like I said before, an object has a location, it has a rotation, and it has a scale. So if we want to animate any of these properties, we have to go to the keying set and then tell it we want to do location and rotation as an example. And to insert a keyframe in the with your cursor in the viewport, you can press I to insert a keyframe. And because we just selected location and rotation, you can see it and inserted the keyframe for those two channels. And then if we say move 20 frames ahead and we move the monkey up and rotate them a bit about, then you can see them noted as green, meaning there's no keying data, or you can see them in orange, meaning that something has changed from the previous keyframe, but it is not currently saved. So if we press I again, then you see everything turns yellow, meaning everything has a keyframe now for that location and rotation. And then at the end, we can take the first keyframe as an example, and we can press Control Copy or Control C and move to, say, frame 40, and then we can paste it, and then you technically now have a looping animation. Our animation is, however, only 40 frames, and our frame range currently ranges from 1 to 250. So clicking here, we can change that to 40, and then you should get a looping animation out of it. But that is enough for showcasing, I think, some of the user interface. I don't expect everybody to be like, what I would encourage is everybody open up Blender and maybe not even the seeker file, but just creating new windows by splitting them and then checking what each of those windows are. So what is a UV editor? If you don't understand what a UV editor is, maybe just have a Google, what is a UV editor for. Blender does a really good job at documenting all of this for newcomers. And there's too much to go through, so I'm just going to focus on what is relevant for us today. Yeah, so if you jump straight into the seeker scene, you might get overwhelmed, but we'll see how we get on. So I had my seeker downloaded previously from Fluff Underground, and that's my guy here, the rarest of them all. How I wish. I was so gutted I didn't get the Moritz one. Okay, so this one is now, like I described before, this viewport is pre-configured by us to give you an overview of sort of some of the things that we work with personally, plus a text editor to have a little bit of a descriptive text, I guess, about your model and what to expect. So the first thing you can do when you open the scene is hover over the top left corner of your, if you press middle mouse button while hovering over the bar at the top, you can drag your editor line over to reveal what it is on the left. So this is the dope sheet. And what we want to do is hover your cursor in the top left corner and drag it over onto the text, and then that should take over the screen there. So you have your dope sheet, and at the moment, this ships with the animation that you own from your NFT, baked into a single animation. So the way we had it set up for our workflow is we have all these different animation layers as to what the secondary arm does, what the primary arm does, what the facial expression is, or how the seeker animates itself. And then to export that to the users, we had to take all these, like a Photoshop file, we had to collapse it into a single animation, and then it's baked onto every frame. And then if you have simplify enabled, like I described before, otherwise your scene might be a bit sluggish, and press play at the timeline, this is your timeline. There's a play button. If you play it, that should be the same animation that you saw when you got your NFT in video format. Okay, so this is your animation, but right now, the goal of this, I suppose, is there's a competition coming up, I think. The goal is to get everybody up to speed on how to do something themselves. And there's a few more core things to understand. So I might have skipped over this at the start. I guess the most important thing for everybody is, how do I actually move my viewport around? So in that case, it's middle mouse button to rotate. It's Alt and middle mouse button to sort of snap your view to the different directions. Shift and middle mouse button to pan. And then you can scroll up or down to zoom in and out. Personally, I use, so if the screencast keys don't match fully, it's because I'm using what you call 3 mouse button inputs, which is this guy here in your preferences. And what that allows me to do is pressing Control and Alt and left click to zoom in, Alt and Shift to pan around, and Alt and left click to rotate. You don't have to do this. It's just if you see discrepancies by what I just told you about how to move the viewport, then that's why. Okay, secondly, the way to move your seeker around is by selecting the bones, or under your chassis, find your chassis and click on what you call an armature. An armature is basically an object that contains a lot of bones describing the structure of your seeker in this case, or if you have a human, it's basically the skeleton of your mesh that makes everything move. And then each part of the mesh is basically just told which bone influences you. It's quite easy with things like mechanical things, because usually something is either influenced by a bone or it's not. Whereas if you work with what you call organic models, like humans or other things, there might be, say, your shoulder and your arm. If you have a bone, say, for your upper arm, it might also influence, like if I move my upper arm about, then there's going to be some movement in the areas around the upper arm. But this one is very straightforward because it's mechanical. So do you have to use a rig to animate? Yes. Oh, no, that's not true. Depending on the complexity of the animation, you definitely don't have to. And you can see, for example, this the spotlight by itself. I can put the armature itself into what you call a rest position, which is usually the position in like you've seen that before in games, I suppose, where the character stands like in a T pose, is what you call it. In this case, a rest pose. And this is like, once it's in rest pose, my seeker is not going to animate anymore. But the procedural animation that I have on other parts of the mesh, they're still going to animate. So you can see my spotlight, for example, is animating left and right and up and down. And a single object can be animated either through putting in keyframes, or in this case, and I'm not going to go into how to set up drivers because that's a bit more complicated, I suppose, but you can add what you call drivers into a single channel into multiple channels if you want to. So this one, for example, is just a mathematical expression that says, like, we want to interpolate between two values, and then we're using a smooth step function to say what are, like, how far away are those values, and then we give it frame data as well as a rotational value. So tau being pi times 2 divided by the frame range, and then how the frequency. I don't want to go too much into. I mean, you might have one of these assets that have driver-driven animation data in them. It's fun to experiment with it, but it's too much for the scope of this purpose. But you do, in short, you don't need an armature to make something move, rotate it, or do whatever with it. All you need to have really is a transform. A transform can be anything. Like I showed in the previous scene, Suzanne by itself has these transforms, right? You can animate them without an armature, but that means that I can't easily move the ears, I can't easily move any other part of this. So the benefit of having an armature is that you have one animation that encapsulates a much more complex target, whereas this one is really just for make something move left, right, up, down, rotate it, or scale it, which sometimes is all you need, and it's fine. So like I said, to animate, we find our chassis, and in the chassis we find the armature, and we'll put it back into pose mode. And at the moment, the dope sheet describes the action of this object, what it's currently animating in. So we have the base layer selected as an animation in our action editor. And the first thing you want to do is press that little shield icon, which is a fake user. So when we close this animation afterwards, we're not going to lose it. So anything that doesn't have a user assigned to it at the time that we close it. So if you save your Blender file and you open it again and you forgot to assign a fake user and your armature is no longer using it, next time Blender is going to look at that and say, hey, nobody's using that, I'm going to throw it in the bin, and then it's gone. Then you have to re-download it, and that's going to be frustrating. So make sure to click that little icon. And yeah, to start a new animation, we can start by dope sheet. You want to have the action editor selected, and then you click on the little new icon, and then call this like, this is my action. Cool. So now you have a new fresh action. It has no animation data in it. And again, the other pieces that are still animating is from the drivers that I have in the scene. They're not related to the bones. And what you do in a new animation usually is if you have an armature selected, maybe that's a more fundamental thing to talk about. Certain things in Blender have different modes, so to speak. So if I select a mesh, for example, let's go back to Suzanne. A mesh, for example, has all these different modes. It has an object mode, it has an edit mode. In edit mode, for example, we can move vertices around, or we can bevel stuff, or we can extrude stuff, that kind of thing. In sculpt mode, like the name describes, if we press, once we are in sculpt mode and we press T, we get our different brushes that we can work with. And then I select the grab brush by pressing G, and then you can move it around like that. So, and F to make it bigger and smaller. So that's the sculpt mode. You have vertex paint, where you can straight up paint on your mesh. This is white, so you could paint per vertex a color. And you have weight paint, which what I described before about armatures is that if you have a certain bone in an armature, you can say how much does that bone affect that part of the mesh. So if we make a new armature here, as an example, so just 2 bones, and then we take the monkey and we were to parent it to this armature with automatic weights. So if I go into weight paint mode now, you can see how much each bone is influencing that part of the mesh, and you can see that in the weight paint mode. So if I grab the bones and move them around, you can see like how each bone affects that part of the mesh. And then the last one is texture paint, and we're not going to worry about that for now. So going back to our armature has 3 modes. It has object mode, which is moving the whole thing as an object, as a whole. We have edit mode, which you can make edits to your bone structure. Say you want to have a new bone to animate something specific, you can duplicate it or add a new bone and add it to where you want it, and then add the weight paints on the mesh, like I just shown with the Suzanne, and then you could edit this. But what we're after right now is the pose mode, and the pose mode is basically where you can take what we currently have and you can start moving it around. So for example, we can move the arm around now. So you select the hand bone and you move it all about. And you can move the fingers. And the way I'm moving stuff, by the way, if you select something, you can press G to move objects around. You can press R to rotate it, or you can press S to scale it. And then we find a pose that we want to put our guy in. So we select the hand bone, and you can experiment what the different bones do, I suppose. Move the finger about. What else? If I go into rendered view, which by the way is that little button up here, I have to put a disclaimer: do not press the viewport shading button, because what it's going to try to do is create a real-time representation of the shader. And even though our shaders are stripped down at this point, that's still going to take a long time for your computer to compile all the different materials in the scene, and it's going to look like it's going to crash your Blender screen, but what it really does is it's compiling the shader, and it takes forever. So don't press that button. Press that button, viewport shading, or press the hotkey, which is Z, and go to rendered view. Just don't use material preview. Switch between solid and rendered. For the rendered view, we have the eyes. So you have a bone to move the eye around. So you can look a little bit derpy. We can rotate it. And then there is one for the eyelid on the top. And then there is another bone in there for the eyelid at the bottom.
I was going to suggest we maybe ask the audience what part of the Seeker they want animated, and then you can show them how to, and in what way, and then you can show them how to do it.
Yeah, 100%. I'd be happy to.
So maybe chat if there's any attachment that you would like to see animated. Throw it at Moritz. We're going to test his 3D animation skills, which you obviously have a lot of.
When you say attachment, you mean like any attachments?
Yeah, maybe any attachment. Because we've got that's quite a good one there. It's got it's got the disco ball, the 3D scanner, the everything. Okay, not goblin. Yeah, of what is on the Seeker right now, not another attachment.
I can go to the master scene and grab the goblin drill. I don't really mind.
Jesse said, "How do you add shine?"
What do you mean by shine? Like a bloom effect?
There was actually another question up here that just said, Root Drip asked, "How do you turn on and off the simplify flag?"
Right, the simplify flag, that is down here in your properties under the little camera icon, and then you scroll down to simplify. So either disable it completely by clicking on this, or increase your number of subdivisions by typing in a number. So now the maximum subdivisions is 3, which makes your object as a whole look smoother. But if I try to play back the animation now, you'll see my frame rate is tanking. It's absolutely dying. It's too high polygons too many polygons to animate. So my recommendation is leave it either at 1, and this is a really strong computer, by the way, or leave it at 0. And that way, it's all about just previewing what you're working on.
Cool. I think just looking at the chat, I love all of the recommendations for part swap, but I think what would be probably more appropriate with the upcoming announcement that I'm going to announce after this call is maybe if we just show how to do like a unique animation of like one of the attachments that are already on there, like just say figure out how to like go cross-eyed or you know, something like that, if that's cool with the chat.
I do render in Blender. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, spin the disco ball like a basketball. Yep, we can do that. And maybe grow cross-eyed, just to show two really simple like examples of how to use your 3D file without doing any like additional, probably difficult exporting and importing that folks probably won't be able
Yep.
to do all the time.
I like the disco ball idea.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so we select our armature, and again we go into pose mode. And I think if we want to start out fresh anyway, we may as well. Should we clear the animation that we have now? Maybe not, because everybody has a starting frame anyway. So what we'll do is we'll move the body of the seeker into a neutral position. So we select the body bone, and you can clear the position, rotation, and scale of a bone by pressing Alt-G, Alt-R, and Alt-S, which, if you remember, G is for moving, rotation is R, and scaling is S. And if you press Alt, in a lot of cases in Blender, Alt does like the inverse of that. So in that case, clearing the locations. So in the timeline down here, with our keying set, on the first frame, what we want to key down is our whole character. So just on the first frame, and that ensures that every bone that we have in the character has now a keyframe associated with it on its default pose, so to speak. And then once you've done that, you can change that again to location and rotation, perhaps. I don't think we'll need scale for this. And then what I also like to do is press that little record button. So that does, what that does is that where before, if I move a bone around a little bit, every time I move it, I have to press I to confirm this is what I wanted to do. Whereas what you can imagine a record button would do is that if I move it, it saves it automatically. So I can, it's just important that you remember that you have that turned on, because as you're animating stuff, you know, as you're animating your seeker, and then you stop animating and you start moving your lights around, you're going to start adding keyframes to literally everything. So make sure it's only on when you want to move the bones around, and then when you finish moving them around, turn it off again. So I think the simplest thing to start off with now, let me hide the root bone. To hide something, you just press H, so you can click on any bone and press H to hide that. And then this is our initial keyframe. So what happens at the start of an animation, for most animations, what you want to do is like a block out. So you select a few frames, a handful of frames where you say, those are your actual keyframes, your key poses of the character. Say if he's at the start of the animation, he's just standing there with his disco ball. And I leave the more creative choices to you guys when you actually animate your seeker. This is your first pose, and then we know, well, first of all, I guess we know that he hovers the whole time. So we can go say we're animating at 30 frames per second. So this gives you a reference for timings, I suppose. So does it take him 1 second to hover down, and then 2 seconds to hover back up? And if I play that back, it's really important that you test this regularly. So I set my frame range from 0 to 60, because this is the frame range that I'm trialing out. And then if I play this back, which is the little play button down here, or if you can't see it, it's Shift Spacebar in my case to trigger the animation. And does that feel too slow? Does that feel too fast? You know, you be the judge of that. I think it's a little bit slow. So what you can do is select your keyframe. So I click on the top one, which is called a summary keyframe, which means everything that's keyed down on that frame is going to be selected. And I'm going to move them down maybe to 20 frames and 40 frames. And then this is going to be a little bit faster. And that looks better. And then because a hovering animation, for the most part, is just going to be going up and down, we'll do maybe 120. And then we can take these two keyframes and we'll just, so click on that one, move, press Ctrl-C to copy them, and then press Ctrl-V to paste them, and then paste them one more time. And then I'm guessing the first one should probably be this one in terms of height. You got to make sure that your first keyframe and your last keyframe are the same so that your animation ends up looping. And now he's already hovering. And then for key poses, what I would do next is probably, so you can see the hand has only one keyframe, which is on frame 0. And you can see the keyframes for any particular part of your armature by, well, obviously when you click on it, you see where it's actually keyed down. So you see only frame 0, and then maybe at frame 40, he can sort of bring it down a little bit. Let's see, he brings it down, too slow. Let me move it forward a bit. Down, still too slow. Wait, what did I didn't move it. Oops. Okay, brings it down, and then as he goes up, I guess he can chuck it. So I'm here somewhere, with the elbow there. And animation is, honestly, it's quite a tedious process. It's not like a quick thing to do, by the way. Let's just see what that looks like. At this point, it's still there. So you can see he's now throwing it in the air. Whoop. It would hang there for a little bit. And all we're concerned with right now is sort of blocking out what you call the key poses. We're not concerned about like how much hang time the ball has, how you know, if it has principles of animation overlapping and all that. So what has to happen now is, I guess, the fingers will have to curl in. So he does like a little finger in the air kind of thing, which is an interesting thing to do as well. So if we select multiple bones, at the moment, if we try to rotate them, so if we press R for rotation and then press X for the axis that we want to rotate it on, which, by the way, if you zoom in on the bone, you can see the axes there. So this is, we want to rotate each bone around its x-axis to kind of curl it in. But if we do it at the moment, if we press R and then X, we kind of just move the whole bone around what you call the bounding box. So if you press the comma next to your shift key, you have different orientation methods. So normal is correct. And if you press full stop, you can change the origin from bounding box to individual origins. So if I press R and X now, each bone is going to rotate around its x-axis individually, like a curl, which is what we want. And then we take the thumb and we bring that in as well. And then we take the finger and we make that. I think people actually balance the ball on like the fingernail portion. I'm not sure. I guess it's thinking about it too much. What you can also see is because the ball is currently parented to the hand, that if I make changes to the hand, the ball is also going to move with it. And if you want to avoid that from happening, what you would need to do is actually edit the rig so that the ball no longer follows the hand, and then add a constraint instead. It's not in the scope of this tutorial to do this, so I'm just going to compensate for it now, which might look a little bit wrong. And like you can see, the ball is moving there, which it shouldn't. And then we'll just bring the ball onto the finger. together. Whoop. Bounces on the finger, and then I guess at this point here it should start rotating. So what we can do here is press N to bring up the properties panel. And the properties panel, like before, an object, anything that you select in your viewport usually has properties associated with it. So in this case, you have, for example, the rotation Y is the one that we're after, and this is what we want to animate. So we can key it down here. This is another problem. This bone is currently actually set to quaternion rotations, which is not what we need. What we need is a Euler rotation, and quaternion rotation is to combat a very specific problem in 3D animation, which is called gimbal lock. But for the animation that we're trying to achieve, we want to go past 360 degrees. So we will actually need a Euler type rotation. That's going to destroy all the animation data that we've done before. Oh, no, it won't. Interesting. So the quaternion animation that we keyed down before is still happening, but I guess it's less optimal. But what we can do now is we can take the Y rotation of this object and start animating it at this point in Euler space. So if I press I add a rotation to this, and then we go, say, to frame 80, and then we just crank that up. It's doing a lot of rotations. So it starts rotating. It's a disco ball. It's very hard to observe the rotation on this. Maybe a little bit less so we can actually see it. It's a slow rotation. Chucks it up, and then it rotates. And then at this point, I guess he would go down a little bit. Go down a little bit, and then chuck it back in the air. Whoop. Whoop. And then we clear the position, and we can take from the fingers the original pose because we keyed it down on frame 0, if you remember how he was holding the ball then. So we can steal that animation data from here. So first, we want to make sure that until frame 95, he's keeping his finger in this position, which is the keyframes that we've added here. We copy them over, and then actually maybe till frame 90. He's holding that finger position. And then from frame 90 to frame 95, he's opening his fingers back to how they were previously, which was like this. So we select the fingers, we press Control-C to copy them, and then in the viewport, Control-V. And the same for this guy, that should be this position there. So he chucks it in the air. And you can see the fingers should probably open up sooner again. So we take that whole thing and move it over a little bit. Oh. And then from here, we can just go back to the starting position overall. So we go back, we select everything, the whole rig. I press A to select it. I take the first keyframe, I copy that over by pressing Control-C. So I select the summary keyframe, I go over to frame 120 and I paste it in. And now we've got a spinning ball. Actually, I destroyed the rotation aspect. So it lands here, frame 44, until here. We said this rotates a bunch. And then we got to make sure that that value stays the same, otherwise it rotates really quickly back to where it was. Cool. Chucks it in the air, catches it, and then back to frame 0. And then this is sort of the basics of blocking out an animation. What you would do at this point is play it back a bunch. Keep in mind that we're currently playing this back at about 20 frames per second. So when you render out your final animation, it's actually going to play slightly faster. It is only because the viewport is too bogged down by too many things that it's playing back a bit slower. What I would recommend is hide the collections that you don't actually need right now to speed up your overall viewport. So in your outliner, again, you can go to backpack and you can say, okay, my backpack doesn't need, like, I don't even see it right now. And the primary arm is not relevant for what I'm doing right now. So you can go through the disco ball is, and then you can kind of ease up on your scene a little bit. And now I'm getting 30 frames, and then you can see like it plays much faster. And that is the actual speed that you're going to get when you render out your scene in the end. I think the eyes are still kind of derpy because I played around with them. Yeah, they are. Okay, so I can select the eyes. I can clear the location, rotation, and scale again, which we just discussed before is Alt-G, Alt-R, and Alt-S. And then maybe on the last frame, they also need to be cleared, or we can delete it. Yeah. So maybe at this point, he can like look at the ball and maybe he's happy about it. What a happy robot. Just a nice little happy robot. There should be a Bob Ross of 3D artists. If any of you get good at this and want to fill that void in my life, it'd be great.
I think you are the Bob Ross of 3D artists, Moritz. I think that was such a beautiful... I want to take that little snippet. Oh, what a beautiful, happy robot. Look at that happy robot.
If I was as positive as Bob Ross in life, I would have 0 issues. And that's it. Yeah, this is sort of how you block out an animation. I think if we go into more detail now on how to use the graph editor, for example. So in the windows, like I described before, you can turn any window into anything you want. So you can keep the dope sheet open and look at the graph editor if you make yourself a new window, or just turn this into the graph editor. And the graph editor is basically your animation represented in, well, as a graph. This is the motion, for example, of the hand bone. How much does it move in the x-axis and other axes? I think I just crashed my Blender. This is not good. Oh no, it survived. Yeah, so this is your graph editor. Like, how much does it move in the x-axis? And then what you can do here is, look at your keyframes. Do they do anything meaningful? If not, you can either get rid of them or you can, make them fancier. And you'll have to do this for every single thing that you key down. Is it because I'm rendering the scene? I think it's because this is still in render view. So let me save that. Yeah, so what you can do is you can select each key. And if I, in the graph editor, if I pick this key and I start moving it around, you see what it does. And then you can take the next one. And what you want to do is, I mean, it really depends on the type of animation that you want to do. You want to think about it like, this is a throw, so he's going into an upwards motion. So what we want is, like, we want to get to the lowest point, and then it should feel like a quick, I'm chucking it up. So this should probably be even more extreme. You can start moving keyframes in here. So you can select this guy and then move it over. This one we don't need. And then this might look a little bit faster. So, you know what I mean? So we'll grab a keyframe, and then what you really want to do is create sort of a smooth looking curve. And then we come down and chuck it up. I think this might be the Z location at this point. Yeah, this is the throw here. because one happens more in the y-axis, the other one happens more through the z-axis. But you would go through each individual channel, make sure that your timings are correct and your graph looks snazzy. And then if you go on YouTube and you type in principles of animation, you'll find a very long list of tutorials to look at. And there's one in particular, I think that's the best one I've watched so far. Let me quickly see if I can find it. Which was illustrated through, it's called 12 Principles of Animation, official full series. That one describes really well sort of how the different principles work and how they should be applied. So if you have your key poses keyed in, you can then look at the animation as a whole and look like, where can I add more anticipation? Like, is he going to hold that ball longer? Like, you don't know what he's going to do with it, and then it goes, whoop. And then you have overlap, for example, where the ball comes down and makes contact with his finger, then there should be a little oof where the hand goes down. Animation is a really lengthy process. I would encourage people that do any kind of blockout animation at that point, share it on Discord, share it with friends and family, see what they think, see if timings can be improved, and then make it an iterative sort of collaborative thing. Like, don't think that's, because that's the biggest thing in art in general, is that people are too self-conscious about sharing what they've done. And it's so important to grow in any skill, because 3D animate, I'm not a great 3D animator, I know that, but you don't get better if you don't share it with other people. So I highly encourage, like, share it with friends, family, Discord, anybody. Get feedback. The people on Discord are so bloody friendly. And make it an iterative process and then see what people say and make your changes according to that. What I'm curious about is if the audience has any particular requests, things they would like to know that they're wondering about. Maybe Monty, you can.
Yeah. Definitely. If there are any questions or any suggestions for, so we'd like to do a little bit of a series on these. So if there are any, I saw some questions in the chat which I'll be going through and chatting with you, Moritz, about, and seeing if there is anything that you specifically want to learn about in terms of 3D animation, and then we'll have a couple more episodes of this, which would be wonderful. So we will be in the Discord after this, so feel free to chat in there. And speaking of collaboration and learning new skills and getting better at it through community, maybe now's a great time for me to announce our 3D animation comp, which you kind of leaked earlier, which was totally fine because
I didn't know.
It's okay. Literally right now, it has gone live on Twitter. So for those of you who haven't seen, we are releasing a massive, and I mean massive, 3D animation comp for all of you budding 3D artists out there in the Discord, on Twitter, and the stream, wherever you may be. We're setting the task out to our community to show us the seekers in their natural habitat, how they communicate. Really, the floor is yours. You can create whatever you want with your 3D animation, and we really want to encourage participation for like people who haven't tried before or those who have like solid chops in 3D animation. Whatever it may be, you'll be using your seekers to create that. And I just want to let you know on some of the prizes, because the prizes, ladies and gentlemen, are insane. Let me get this up. We have, where is it? There it is. So in first place, we have 5K USDT. We have a Futureverse asset pack containing a Fluff, Alter State Machine, Genesis Brain, Party Bear, Seeker, Atom Club membership card. We have a Seekers merch kit. We have 1 million in Sylo to be won for first place. For second place, we have 3K USDT, a Seeker node starting kit containing a Seeker, a Seeker's merch kit, and 750K Sylo. And then in third place, we have 1,000 USDT, a Seeker's node starter kit containing a Seeker, a merch kit, and 500K Sylo. So it is a massive, massive prize competition that we're going to be putting on for, and it's going to be running for the next couple of months because, as we know, 3D animation does take a bit of time. I mean, Moritz has the chops to get it all done and sorted in like under an hour, but we're going to give you guys a huge we're going to give you about 2 months to get all of your animations in, and we really want to encourage collaboration on this one. So Moritz and I will be hosting these chats every couple of weeks. So whatever you're stuck on, want to learn, we will be really getting through like the nitty gritty on how to do that. And this is also for amateurs as well. If you haven't done it before, we want to see you in the Discord, ask questions. I also love a Sims glitch moment. So please give it a go. Don't be discouraged because there may be people that are a little bit more experienced than you. I really want to see what you can do. I mean, if you look at the Futureverse, we've got 3 assets for Fluffs, Partyviz, and Seekers. So why not get some folks that maybe haven't done it before? Give it a go. And there will be a 3D animation channel that's going live probably as soon as this course over. So that is where you can post animation feedback, talk about the competition, talk about your entry, all those sorts of things, and get some VIP expert advice from our resident expert, Mr. Moritz. So
I see a few people asking about sort of where to post this to get feedback.
Mm-hmm.
There's a YouTube channel that I watch a lot on 3D animation and Blender, and the guy's name is Pierre Picard, butchering the name probably. He's a French animator. He's got a Discord. He's got a course that it's very affordable, I think even free, some of it, that I would recommend to look at and possibly join. He has this from very beginner to advanced learning. So his name, if you type in P2, like P2 Design in YouTube, you'll find his stuff. And then the other thing, I see a few people saying that amateurs and people who have kids and full-time jobs. I've got kids and full-time jobs, and I work after hours on my own stuff all the time. And my wife is very understanding with this. But when the kids are going to sleep, if you actually enjoy working on this stuff, there's always time. But I know that this is not for everybody, and this is not, if you don't have the enthusiasm for it, that's just what it is, I guess. But I think it would be taken into account as well. If you're an amateur and you try something, and you experiment with it, amateurs can do just as good a work as experts, and it's taking it slow, giving it a go, and then accumulating feedback. I think everybody has a valid shot at, if they're interested in this, to do really well.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And work within your scope. This was such a good suggestion. I don't know who made the suggestion for the basketball, but this is such a good example of taking something simple. So if in your head you're going to do an animation where he does 3 backflips through fire hoops and into a shark tank, and there's going to be a shark that's going to attacking him. If you have the experience and you know how to do this, I would say go for it. But if you don't, something small and simple like this, executed well, or made a lot of progress in, is probably going to look better than aiming for the stars, and because there's a time limit on this. So
totally. Yeah, definitely. Wow.
Yeah, Moomin, that was a good suggestion.
Yeah, look at it. It looks amazing. That was so good. Awesome. Well, everybody, if anybody has any last minute questions, feel free to pop it in the chat now. If not, we will be in Discord, so feel free to type any of your questions in there. I'll give you a couple more minutes, but yeah, basically, thank you so much, Moritz, for taking the time out to come and chat with us today. Someone says, can Fluffs or Partyviz be in the frames? Yes, you can totally add your other Futureverse assets in there if you would so like. Oh yes, Poets for the Crew. Thank you, Rio. I literally almost stopped the whole stream there. How could I forget? All right, so I was thinking about, so Moritz, this is a very tricky time. This is where we decide what the POAP word will be, the proof of attendance protocol word, so that we know that they really were here. The first one was chainsaw, which then gave Josh the affectionate name Chainsaw Josh. What do you think that the POAP word should be this week? We've got some suggestions in the chat, but it's up to you, Moritz. What do you think?
I'm fully stuck on Globetrotter.
Globetrotter.
Yeah.
I like Globetrotter. Okay, you heard it here first, people. The POAP word for this session is Globetrotter. So if you are here right now, feel free to go into our Discord, open a ticket, and write Globetrotter, and then we will award you our POAP. I got distracted because I looked at Metaverse comment about diarrhea. Please. trying to keep my mind on one thing. I'm so bad. Whenever the comments come up, I'm trying to ignore you. Like, I'm really trying to ignore people when they write comments. I'm like, nope, not watching. But yes, awesome. So so that part word is Globetrotter. And if you have any suggestions for the next installment of our Blender Basics with Mr. Moritz, please post them in the chat. We'll be putting together a little bit of a type form for people to give feedback and what they would like to see next. And yeah, in the meantime, head on into Discord, ask us some more questions, check out the comp and the T's and C's. And finally, thank you so much, Moritz, for coming and joining us today. It has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much to everybody who tuned in. Any final words, Moritz?
No, I just saying, had a really good time off the cuff. It was a really nice experience, and it's nice to see people posting their questions and engaging in the stuff. And I hope that even if one person picks up Blender out of this, I'd be happy.
Yes, one of us. Amazing. All right, everybody. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again very soon. Thank you so much.
See you guys.
Bye.